All right, we don't need too much. We're not trying to do an active aggressive. It's revolutionary suicide. He's like a kamikaze. He goes, as soon as he gets into Jerusalem, he basically put on a big scene, a big stink, flipped over the tables, started whipping shit, freed all the birds, freed all the animals. And then got the fuck up out of Dodge, but then the next day, he's right back in Jerusalem, still preaching. In John 19:11, he says, "You have no power over me, Pontius Pilate, if it doesn't come from above." So Jesus is confronting the authorities. He's talking about, there are no fathers on earth. He also says that you have to hate your father and your mother and your brother and your sister. So in the Sermon on the Mount, he says if you have hatred for your brother, that's akin to murder. But then he also says, if you want to follow me, then you have to hate not only your mother, brother, father, sister, brother, cousin, aunt, uncle, goddamn, your uncle's dog, basically anybody and everybody in your family, but you also need to hate yourself. Then you are worthy of following him. And so, I don't know exactly, I interpret all this the way I understand this is that he is saying that he's got this good revolutionary message, and that if you hear the revolutionary message, then follow him directly, literally follow him by adopting his teachings and his philosophy. He doesn't really want you to hate all those people, but he's saying that if you're just so down in the dumps that you kind of hate everybody and everything, then you would be a good follower of him because you got nothing else. Hey, you who's all a depressed mess, follow me. You're a depressed mess? Well, give old Jesus a call. So he seems like an agitator. I don't know if he's got a hot temper. He's got a little bit of a temper. He's come to divide families, right? And then the truth divides because it exposes divided hearts, divided villages, divided households. Truth tellers are actually more powerful than a king. So I want to read John 19:11 because this is when he's staring down Pontius Pilate. He ain't scared. Oh, Pontius Pilate, you la-di-da-di-da. What are you going to do, crucify me? Huh, Pontius Pilate? John 19:11, what does Jesus say? Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. Soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no crime in him." So he kind of smacks him around a little bit, but then he's saying that he's innocent. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priest and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" So the chief priest, the officers, Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no crime in him." So it's almost like Pontius Pilate's like, I don't want him to die. He hasn't really done anything. And then the audience that is in front of him, and here it says the Jews, right? Like it's all the Jewish people. So the group of people that were, I guess part of the Jewish clique, they said, "We have a law," and then he talked about the chief priest, so that could be who they're talking about. We have the Sadducees and the Pharisees. "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." Where am I? 19:11. Okay, so it's coming up. It's the last sentence of this paragraph. When Pilate heard these words, he was the more afraid. He entered the praetorium again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. So Pontius Pilate, hey, he asked you a question, Jesus. Jesus just remained silent, right? So you have a right to remain silent. Jesus knows the Fifth Amendment somehow. Somehow, 2,000 years ago, he knows the Fifth Amendment. Pilate therefore said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered Pontius Pilate, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." So he was saying that Pontius Pilate may condemn him and then ultimately kill him, but he's saying that the person that delivered Jesus to him, so the ones that arrested him, Judas, and the ones that had arrested Jesus, they did the greater sin. And so he also tells Pontius Pilate that maybe you condemn him, maybe you don't, but it's God. You're only going to do whatever God gives you the authority to do. You have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. You have no power over me unless it has been given to you above. So he's saying that God is the ultimate authority. God is the ultimate lawgiver, law creator, the ultimate father, the ultimate teacher. To hell with all you authority motherfuckers. To hell with you religious and you political authority sons of bitches. We only bow down to Lord King our God. We're not going to bow down to no man. Upon this Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king sets himself against Caesar. When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, and in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now, it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, here is your king. They cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, we have no king but Caesar. Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. Pilate also wrote a title and put it on the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. The chief priest of the Jews then said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but this man said, I am King of the Jews. Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and made 4 parts, one for each soldier, but his tunic was without seam, woven from top to bottom. So they said to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture. They parted the garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So the soldier did this, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing near, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, said to fulfill the scripture, I thirst. A bowl of vinegar stood there, so they put a sponge full of vinegar on the hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I'll just stop right there. But whereas Lama, Eli, Eli, Lama Sabachthani, I thought, my God, why have you forsaken me? So this is the book of John. In another gospel, his final words are, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That's Aramaic for, my God, why have you forsaken me? But there's a lot of things I want to talk about in what I just said. So I'll just pick like 3 things, okay? They're going to put him between 2 other people. And those 2 other people, we were told that they were thieves, but actually they're bandits. And bandits is an insurrectionist. So they didn't use the actual word for bandits. They used the word for the word for thief. They used the word for bandit. So they're interpreting some of these words wrong, and so it kind of looks like he's just being crucified with a bunch of thieves. But if it's just a petty thief, the crucifixion was reserved for crimes against the state. So if you were guilty of sedition or treason or, wanting to overthrow the government. It's interesting that we know the hill that he was crucified on, Golgotha. And then Pontius Pilate doesn't actually crucify Jesus, but he gives him over to the chief priest, and the chief priest of the temple are going to crucify him. So that maybe that's the Jews. It's crazy to be like the Jews, like all the Jews, like the Muslims, the Christians. There's 2 billion Muslims in the world. And then I was talking to the Christians, and the Christians said that I am the Messiah. So that's nice. I got that going for me. And then there's